Do I push continue?
I did. Okay. Is that 5? It's 4 o'clock. Aloha no kako. Aloha ahi ahi ano ahi ahi. Let's see. Let me just run through here and just wave my hand. I see that's Kahulu. Oh, Kahulu. How are you? Okay. Aloha no kako. My name is Taupori Tangaro, and today, or this afternoon, we're going to be vala'auing with Umi. And I usually call him Umi Kai because it sounds a little bit like rock star, yeah, Umi Kai. So it's hard for me to just say Umi, but this is Umi. And he'll be sharing with us his story. There's a reason why we're gathered. And this series is called Mōkaulele. And Mōkaulele is the big mythical hook of the kupua Maui. And he used to use this hook to do the unusual things. And look, and then you have behind Umi, you have his hook over there, so how appropriate. But he once, Maui once attempted to pull the island of Maui with his hook, Manaya Maui, Manaya Kalani. He hooked Maui, the island, and he dragged him all the way to Hilo. He wanted to connect the two islands. And he nearly succeeded, except somebody on a canoe lost their focus. And the cord snapped, the hook went fly, and the island Maui went back to Maui. But a little chunk of Maui is in our bay. It's called Mōkaulele, the island of life. So according to our truths, that piece is a reminder, it's a piece of Maui, and it's a reminder that we can do if we just stay focused, we can bring two unlike things together. Mōkaulele, the flying hook, is where the University of Hawaii is, the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And so for a number of layers, we chose the name Mōkaulele. But also, there's a function for the hook. And there's a reason for a hook, and we can discuss this later. But in this case, the hook is being presented to us in the hopes that we can hook things that bring particular values from the depths and from the faraway places and bring it closer to us. This has to do with art. This season is focused on art. And we bring this discussion. So I look around and say, oh, these are my artist friends. And I say, oh, let's have a vala'au session. And the reason why we focus on the art is an intersection of where the thinking and the feeling brains come together. And that's why in many spiritual places and spaces, art is always there. Art is pre-language. It's a way of communicating. But we wanted not to read about art and the artisan. We wanted to hear from the artisan, their story. And why did we want to hear their story? Because when we hear someone's story, the automatic reaction is to think of our own stories. Think about what's similar. And sometimes a storyteller will say something that feels very, very personal, or sometimes very, very foreign. But in any case, your emotions are going in and out of it. We want you to leave this afternoon knowing Umi Kai, knowing his journey, and knowing the story. So not just his art, but there's a story behind what he does and why he does. But we also want you to leave looking and having a time to reflect on your own story. Where are you in your story? Are you still in Auhea Vale Oe Kapua Hau O Maleka in the first verse? Or are you at Haina Iamai? Or are you somewhere in between? When was the last time you told your story? Is part of your life allowing you to live your story, or suddenly you found yourself living somebody else's story? Now, although this is gauged for student success, we're all students. We're continuously students. We cannot be a teacher without being a student. And so this is good for all of us. If you do have questions that are about his art or about something, an element of his storyline, please put it in the chat. Toward the end of this 1 hour discussion, we would like to open up the chat and read some questions. And then Umi will also give us permission to share with you his contacts if you would like to continue the discussion via email with him. He welcomes you. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and our Mahu communities out there, our relatives, I say aloha. And on behalf of the University of Hawaii at Hilo and Hawaii Community College, we bring to you Mōkaulele. Thank you for biting the hook. You bit the hook. And now it's time to understand why we're here today. Umikai, aloha.
Aloha.
Umi, tell us a little bit about, your name, where you're from, what do we need to know about you?
So, Umiali loa lahana o Kalakaua Kai as a full Hawaiian name. Kai being a last name. My father is from Waiahinu, Mōkaulele. My mother is from Waimea, Mōkaulele. However, I was number 6 of 7 children, and I was born and raised on Oahu. And so Kaimuki has been home for the last 70 years for me, being 70 years old, and have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, with 14 grandchildren. And that's a story in itself. Every time they come over, it's a new experience. They're teaching me as much as I'm teaching them. So it's a good reciprocation. Went to Kaimuki High School, the reject from the big K up the hill. But I think that's enough about me.
Okay, and then you have over there. There's Kim Leoloha. There's Leolani Kalama. She was from the hill. She went to Kalama campus. So you never get the bracelet.
My brothers all win. I never go.
So, me, firstly, thank you for not just sharing your art, but being open to sharing the story behind the art, which oftentimes is not represented when it's in the gallery or someone's wearing it or using it. So this is an opportunity for us to learn about ourselves through your story. Isn't that a beautiful thing? And so we want to learn about you, but we really be learning about ourselves. I want to just create a framework. So the framework, we can look at it as 4 components. And the first component is we call the hua. The hua is like the egg. So when Pele came to Hawaii, her hua was hi'iaka. Yeah. And so, and then hi'iaka hatched and then hi'iaka went on her journey. So we want for you to share with us your hua. And when I say hua, I mean, today you do what you do, but we truly believe there was something that happened in your formative years that triggered certain traits that guided you along this way. Can you describe for us and again, Kaimuki, I'm not sure if it was urban back then. I hear sometimes only recently parts of Oahu has become urban. Some people say Kaimuki was quite country at one point. So can you share with us, what was your rearing like, and what elements of your rearing guided you to what you do today?
Yeah, Kaimuki was back then in the late 40s, early 50s, was pretty country. There was a pig, cow in the backyard. There was chickens. So even though it's a small lot, we still had chickens, and our neighbor had chickens, all 3 of them, rabbits. We had an emu in the backyard, kind of a perpetual emu that would be covered every time it wasn't in use. So Kaimuki was a good growing up area. It wasn't an area as it is today, very urban, but I like it here. It's the climate is drier than other parts of this side of the island, the east side, southeast, west side. I mean, the southeast side. Growing up, when you first mentioned you wanted to dwell deeper, when people ask me what influenced me to make my first Mōkaulele, my first weapon. I always go to my sophomore, junior year in high school where I took woodshop. That's probably one of my best subjects. But when you asked me, I had to go deeper. And so my father passed away when I was 7. And my mother locked up the tool shed that was in the backyard next to a big mango tree. And when I was 10 or 11, I don't remember exactly, I broke into that tool shed and started using the tools that my father left behind. And some I broke, some I successfully used without any direction from anyone, because I really didn't know what the tools were made for, except for a hammer and screwdriver and such. But it reflects on the fact that if you give children or anyone, doesn't have to be children, resources, not only resources and materials to make something with, but resources in like tools, and let them handle them, let them use them. They're going to be creative. They're going to start to create. You don't have to sit down and teach them how to use it. They'll figure it out themselves. And that's how I started. So before that first Mōkaulele, in my junior year at high school, I think I started when I was 10 or 11 with those tools and taking apart things that I couldn't put back together, and building bird cages, bird houses, and toy guns to play with, because we really didn't have money to go and buy toys. And so I think that elementary type of resources is good for everybody, and they should encourage that in all the homes.
Umi, I'm interested to know, what did your mother say when she found out you broke, your words were you broke into? What happened?
She really didn't know for several years, because when I broke in, I smartly unscrewed the latch with the lock on it, because I didn't know what a key was. And when I was POW, I would put the screws back in. So she really didn't know, but when she did find out several years later, then she was happy. She was keeping it locked up because family members tend to borrow things and they never come back.
Yeah.
And so that's the main reason she locked it up. They still came over and she would let them use tools, but not only tools, but my father was noted for his cooking and his imu, coming from Waiahinu. They knew how to make imu. And Eddie Ka'anana said that my father, he worked for my father. My father was a chief posting mate for the Navy, and Uncle Eddie was one of his sailors. And Uncle Eddie had recounted to me when we had first met, and he asked, "What kai you belong to?" And I said, "Douglas Kai." He goes, "You mean Chief Kai?" I go, yeah, Chief Kai. He goes, "Oh my God. You know that we had to do go imu 18 pigs all at one time." So he would pull out the backhoe and he would dig the trench. And he says that was the most pigs we ever had to imu one time. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I like your words. You said broke in. In my mythic mind, I always dealing with ka'au and mythology. There are often times we have to break in. We're not given permission, and for some reason we don't seek the permission. For some reason, then we sneak in. And there's something inquisitive about children, and as you say, the inquisitiveness. If you just provide them the space to pick up things, they'll figure things out on their own. So I think some of us in the audience, we can remember some of our own situations where we did have to, break in, to say, we didn't want to be instructed. We wanted to figure things out. And so, you know, it's an important feature. And so it's so natural. It is so, you know, I always myself thought whenever we're hunting, and now today I'm a vegetarian because, you know, I don't really did 18 pigs. I'm like, oh God, that's a lot of pork. But you know, come from Waiahole, my families were all hunters, and but we used to go into the mountains and go hunting, and I never really cared for where the pig was, but I always wondered what was behind the boulder, what was behind the waterfall, what was over the gulch. So, you know, that was my inquisitive mind. And I spent many years lost in the mountains. And I do believe that breaking in, even when our parents say, don't go over there, if only they knew. But I was like you. Nobody knew. They
Yeah.
thought I was the angel child. They didn't know I was breaking every rule, but I was quite inquisitive. Umi, so you said in your high school, you began your wood, but before we even go further, Noeau, are you there? Everybody, this is Noeau Wu. Noeau, can you show who you are? This is Noeau Wu. He's helping us here. Wu O'Brien from Puna. And so he's going to share with us just this random image. Umi sent us a few. And so I just selected, and no sequence, no order, just, and he was going to share with us this image. And Umi's going to just get triggered by it and share us something about his story via that image. Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. This is a lesson in learning. And you see two of my 14 mo'opuna, the older one, instructing the younger one, because the lesson here is you have not learned the lesson until you're able to teach it. And so she's teaching the younger one who is having a little difficulty getting the making of her koko, her netting. They wanted to make nettings to place their towels and their beach stuff when we had gone to the beach. So this is their first attempt, and the older one got it. And she's not the oldest, but she's older than the one she's teaching. So again, the lesson is, you know, you have not learned it until you can teach it.
Amazing. I love, you know, in academia, they don't want you to teach it unless you get graduated and you got to get the job and stuff like that. But they don't realize it. We're only learning, we're only getting introduced. We have a whole degree of just being introduced. We need to begin to teach it. Teach it, and that makes that go deeper. Personally, you know, when I'm working on chord, I put all kinds of errors in it because I'm trying things out. But when I have to teach it, I become very sequence oriented. Now, I love this photo because does somebody have a face mask on?
Face mask.
Is that a face mask?
Well, they should have been, because this was just last year.
Great. So this photo, this photo is time locked in this time of the pandemic. So it's historic. I love the history of it. Now, the other thing that's interesting is if I use this photo in some of the work that I do, I would ask my students, interpret the chain link fence. What does that have to do with the net? The photographer's on one side and you're on the other side, you know, and just play around with the possibility of that inquiry. But I love that
they're
idea.
Looking, you bring up a good point. Functionality. Now, the fence serves one purpose of keeping people in or out, but it also, in this case, served the purpose of hanging a hook from it so that they could hang their net as they were making their koko. So functionality is a big facet of what you need to learn. And for me, teaching function, that dictates the design that you're going to be making of any item, and it dictates the materials. So if you don't know the function of what you're making, you're going to be lost
Aye.
or wasting your time.
Where did you learn that? To be a teacher, you learned it when you can teach it. Where did you come to that reality?
Where did I come? When I was teaching it. It started when I'm teaching someone something, and if you're in a group of 10 people, there's always part of them get it right away, others get it slowly, and others can get it at all. Okay, so in order to help me help them, the ones that got it, I make them go sit next to the ones that are having a very difficult time. It teaches them patience, and it teaches them the fact that they really did understand what they learned. And they actually appreciate it because now they said, now I see the error that I made, but I didn't know I made that error until I started teaching it.
There is something quite interesting because in academia, it's largely a Western approach to learning. Where you sit there and you learn as an individual, you're just taking all this information, and then you get tested. So you really, a lot of the learning is between you and the teacher. Yeah. But they don't know that in Hawaii, if it's just about us, but if we have to teach it to someone, we get a little bit, soon as our kuleana involves someone else, we become more responsible.
That's right.
And so, that's one of the things that when we began to, teach Hawaiian studies in the 80s, and that's when I began going to school and then began teaching in the late 80s, immediately, and some of my teachers saying, they didn't learn it yet, but I'm like you said, but they're going to learn it quicker if they got to teach it. Or if I pressure them, because once you give them a kuleana, then that competitive sense is going to come up. And now they're going to, and so, that is just a piece of how we learn, and we learn better, knowing that our learning will involve or will include other people. I've only known that we learn better when we have to, but if it's just about ourselves, then we can option in or out. But if it's about other people, it's like the imu. When we make imu, that food better be perfect. You can burn your rice a little bit bullet every night if it's just for you. But if you're cooking for other people, that food better be perfect. And I think that's an asset that we need to know of, and we need to bring into this academic forum. Okay. My next question. Well, by the way, can I ask you the names of your mo'opunas and how old are they?
I'm trying to see the faces. The one standing, the older one, is see, just because you asked, I drew a blank.
Kauhiki.
Oh, that's right. Kauhiki is the older one. I think she's about 14. And the other one, Kaumialani, is maybe 12 years old.
So when are you the photographer?
I took that photo, yes.
So, I stay behind you. I got only 3 mo'opuna, but it's a miracle because every time they come by or they do something, and I see myself all over again.
Yeah.
What runs through your body when you sing you're seeing you in them and that very moment? What's running through your body?
A lot of pride, a lot of happiness, and pride and happiness. I think is the most that runs through my body, and accomplishment. I like to see them more often, but we just can't for more reasons than one. And I apologize to my Keohiki for having a hesitation in my brain for the name, but she understands that Papa Umi has a brain lapse once in a while.
So my
she might
next
be
question
watching.
to you. She might be watching, and she goes, "Papa, of all people, you forget
I know.
me." My next question is, so the hua is, your childhood rearing, something in your youth, something you get triggered, and you said there's how many siblings? There's 6, 7 of you?
There's 7 of us total. I'm number 6. Yeah.
Okay. So the 7 siblings living in a shared space and eating similar food, but children get triggered by different things, and they end up being guided in different routes. And here you are today. You are one of Hawaii's celebrated resources. And at what point, and we call this section I want to talk, so the first one is the hua, now is the ha'alele, the point where you begin to innovate, the point where you begin to take risk. You try to, now you realize, I'm a carver, this is in my blood. So you broke through, that's a ha'alele. You broke through, you flew into that space. So that's a place of ha'alele. But is there another kind of ha'alele in your life that you sort of remember as a huge milestone where you said, this is not going to be a back burner entity. This is a big piece of who I am. When was that?
There are small ha'aleles that occurred after high school, but I think the biggest one occurred when I joined and became a member of Pakuialua. It was at that time that I was being recognized by the Olohes as, where did you come from? Where did you learn how to make this weapon? Where did you know how to shape it? Where did you get all of this information? Almost like questioning me. And so at that time, I needed to do more research because before that, I was just doing it on memory from books by Peter Buck or from visits to the Bishop Museum. And so now I had to do a little more research, which got me involved in the parts of the implement. I had to learn how to explain what kind of cordage it was and why it was effective. I had to learn how to identify woods and why they were preferred woods over another one. My first leoma was out of mango wood because that's all I had. So I started to research a little deeper. Good to note here that I don't read. So my research was in looking at pictures, reading captions, and finding out more information. So I think that was the biggest turning point for what I do today. And what I do today, I don't call art, although it can be classified that. I call them implements with function. And for me, less art, more functionality. And if it doesn't have a function, then it doesn't really have a purpose. So I don't like to waste my time making it when somebody says they want this 5-inch Mōkau, which resembles a Maori Mōkau. So I hesitate to do all of those. I just make something that's functional. And I'm not sure if you saved some of the photos from the Mōkaus that I sent, but you'll see the functionality of those.
So I like that you talked about the Ku'ialua, and then they provided you with another layer by the questioning. And I love questioning because the questioning puts us in a depending on the tone of the question, it puts us in a defense, whether it's whether it's a positive or a negative defense. But now you have to, because there's a value. We grew up, we always had to, people will always ask, or they would always say, why, how you know? How you know? And it might sound rude, but I realize that that is a huge value in our system. How you know is an important piece. And so that provided you an opportunity to go back and go, okay, how do I know? And what can I do to know more? And oftentimes in academia, we find students, they just want to memorize, because that's what they've been groomed from kindergarten, preschool, memorize, memorize. Rare occasion, you have a magical teacher that brings all the magic into the classroom, but generally speaking, memorize, memorize, take a test, memorize, memorize, take a test, and you graduate. And then, but when we ask our students, how it's not enough for them to say, oh, this book, I got this from this book or that book, in the library. They put so much value on things because we have to study the world. And so a lot of the stuff that we know came from somebody we never know. So it's like, oh, a little bit shaky. But in your case, you're studying stuff that were part of the indigenous space, were part of you. There were resources that came from here, whether from the museum or from the books. And then the Ku'ialua world provided you with a challenge, sort of is a challenge, how you know. Some of our students will walk away from those challenges because they immediately feel like they're being, challenges is uncomfortable. But I don't know, even in hula is about challenge. What you've presented, your mo'opuna, was a challenge. What is your function? And if you want to learn this, you got to teach it. And so there's all these challenges. And so, the fact that there was a challenge behind the lock, behind the door, was this world of your father and his tools. Your dad wasn't there in the physical, but we know that the spirit is in that space and in the tools. And you crossed into that challenge. How now we venture into this other piece called Huaka'i, the journey. And what we're our students, as well as the people that, us, all of us, when we say students, we don't just mean the tuition bearing community members, but all of us, we're all students. Can you share with us some of those challenges? Because, what I do know is, if you're doing this work, whenever you have to reinterpret or interpret or innovate, in the arts, in the ritual function, functional tools and implements, and we're not doing craft. So that's one thing we know we're not doing. This is not a craft system. They're functional. Can you share with us what were some of those challenges that put you in a strong place, but maybe some of those challenges that maybe had you question, should I be doing this? Is this really my route? Am I offending my ancestors? Or can you share with us that piece of your story?
I think there were a lot of challenges, and without those challenges, sometimes it's not worthwhile. You need to have challenges. One of the challenges was providing income for a family of 6, including myself, and housing, food, automobile, all the necessities, while trying to create my Namea Hawaii on the side. And that became a challenge. So could only do those on weekends or when I had time after work. But the kids also had activities after work too. So the challenge was meeting a balance with all of that. So I wasn't real active in the beginning while the children were young, but I was lucky enough to have a good wife that was able to stay home because I was a good husband and provided enough incomes that allowed her to stay home and be home when the kids came back home from school and help them with their homework. So I think our kids, knock on wood, are very healthy physically and mentally and spiritually because of that. She was very good with them. Another challenge was finding the resources to make the items. So the first time I made a leo mano, I needed shark teeth, and they don't, back in the 60s, they don't just sell that any place. But I was in Waikiki going to the beach, and I saw this guy sitting at a table counting shark teeth. And his name was Talbot George. And so I asked him where he got the teeth from. And he said, well, I went down to Kiwalo Basin and the fishermen brought them in on jaw. So I went boil them out and they said that the teeth are going to use. So I asked him if I could buy some. And he said, at first he said, no. And then he said, I'll give you a couple. You know, what you gonna do with them? And I told him, then he said, oh, okay, I'll sell you some more for 5 cents one. And so I bought enough to make that first leo mano. And that's another obstacle, is finding people who actually made those items back in the 60s and 70s. So it's almost a self-taught discipline where you have to go out and teach yourself how to make certain items because nobody else was. And then I found people who were making these items and sat down with them, and we exchanged experiences, our trial and errors with each other, and grew from there. Then another challenge is wanting to do it full time, but couldn't. So the challenge was, okay, I'm gonna retire at age 50, so I can do this full time. 50 came and went. I said 50, 55. 55 came and went. So I just, okay, whatever. But I was lucky, and I have always been lucky in my life to get jobs that allowed me to participate in activities that allowed me to progress in what I was doing outside the tourist industry or business section. So those are the challenges. And today, of course, I wanted to retire and do that full time and travel to the neighbor islands and travel to continent and elsewhere with my wife, who is a Lauhala weaver. But things didn't turn out that way, mainly because of an illness. And as a result, we are home and do it whenever we can.
Mm. You said a couple of things that we can, I want to flag. One of them was the resources, and one of them being the domestic resources. You know, this is, so yeah, your father had in his blood, and probably through him to you, in the marrow, the need to work with wood. And we already know that probably came from Grandpa Ma and the Kupuna Ma. So it comes through the Mo'opuna. Then the father leaves the physical scene. He's there in spirit, and there's a wall with a door. It's being protected. And your mother is at the van. You know, she's the one that's keeping that protected. And you and your words, you break into it. And then there's those resources that are there, and you take them, no teacher, in your little secret space. Must have been so magical being in there and doing all of those things. And then you know, you go to school, you find that there's a resource there, there's a teacher, there's the shop, or woodworking, you said. And then you marry a beautiful woman, Lena Ala, and she becomes that resource to take care of the domestic space so that you can, do what you need to do. And then when there's time, you can create. So that resource comes in, because you cannot do it without the domestic resource, unless you're a bachelor. But, we already know that it takes a really strong partner and a supporting one that really helps this come through. And then you mentioned that the Kuialua people, provided you with a challenge. So you did, that's my word, challenge. How what is this? And it made you go into the reading piece, which you don't necessarily like to do, but you found that it was necessary because you needed to know the why. I like the fact that it's very mythical in my mythical mind when you're looking for this resource and you happen upon, what was his name? Talbot
Talbert George.
Talbot George. Talbot George could have been an akua in disguise, a kupua in disguise, sitting there thinking that's my mythical mind. Maybe he was a
tour
kupua.
escort.
Even Pele sometimes take different kind foreign looking bodies. So you never know. He was a tour escort. But isn't it amazing that sometimes these random people we come across has something we need? And there's this exchange. And who's to say that the kupuna didn't make that happen? I mean, how many tourist escorts they have in Waikiki? And you met the one with the tooth. And then, but you did say something that is really, really valuable that we need to underscore is you found yourself. You said there was nobody in the beginning. There's a little isolation. And then you found one person and another. Before you know it, you were part of a community of like minds, challenging each other, questioning each other, making mistakes together, celebrating advances. What is that community like today? You said you talked about the community in the 60s and the 70s. What is that community like today?
That community has gotten larger. That community has gotten smarter. That community has more resources, still lacking in traditional resources, but everything has grown. And I think it's a good thing. And I just have to temper them. And I say them, I mean people who come to me for advice and come to me for the lack of a better term, lessons or teaching how to make. I have to temper them and make sure they understand that what we're doing is a functional item, not something creative. And it's mostly because I'm not creative. So I have to stay with what's traditional because I know it's already been proven as functional. If they want to go and make something extra creative, I don't want them to recognize that it was me they learned it from, because some of these things get a little outlandish, far out, and so if you want to learn the basics, fine. Then you can say that you learned the basic from me, but your final product is not my creation.
I love that piece of the accountability. And I think that's when sometimes, because we lived in a mixed world, sometimes our own people get a little bit confused when they're talking about the quick acquisition of experiences through workshops and accessibility, and they want the quick fix. But what they don't realize is when you pick up these traditional things, it comes with a culture. And the culture is one of accountability, because we have people we have to answer to, people behind us, but also what we create today will affect the people that's still coming, our Mo'opuna and our great Mo'opuna. And so there's this cycle of accountability and there's no exit. And I think that accountability is what sometimes when we leave that accountability, sometimes we get a little bit messed up. because we don't have that bigger picture, the bigger context, that it's not just making a hook, wearing a hook, but there's a culture that derives, even how you wear it, when you wear it. And what I found out in my hula world is you'll have a community of people that just want to learn hula for choreography. And then you'll have 1, 2, 3 of those students that linger because they know that there's a mystery in it, and they're mature and they want to investigate it and they want to contribute to it. And that's that accountability. We cannot just, in the hula world, we can create dances that people can access, but also there's certain kinds of dances that we don't share with just people coming in and out. It's a lifetime commitment, and that accountability. What we do want to do is, I want to give you time, and Noel, if you could share with us 3 slides, and what we're going to do is, Umi, as you see the slide, just talk to us about what these slides trigger, and also the accountability. You said something that's important. You can learn the basics from me, but once you take the basics and you begin going on beyond that, then that's your realm. You have to be accountable to that. I don't have kuleana there. So you set a parameter. And so can you, as we look at these stories, can you share with us some of these, or look at these images, the parameter? What is the role of the parameter in what you do? Okay, so Noel, you ready?
Yes, and just wanted to point out it's 4:45.
Several, I can't remember exactly what year it was. I was asked to accompany a group of archaeologists to Nihoa and Mokomanamana. And my role was just to be the kupuna along with them, because I am older than Tangaroa. And this was an example of the State Department and the park allowing me to fish in a no fishing area with traditional hooks. So this shows you my bone hook that I caught several fish with, enough to have dinner with the entire crew, as the archaeologists were up on the side of the hill doing their research. To me, this proves the genius of the Hawaiian crafts and the how it actually works.
Umi, what is that cord?
There were several Mōkau that I made. A couple had, I wish I had olona, but it didn't. It had hemp as a substitute for olona, and the others had waxed nylon, because I wanted to try both out.
Okay, and then what is the actual the Mōkau itself?
The Mōkau is made from pipi, beef bone.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, got it.
If you blow that up some, then you can see the hook in its mouth.
Yeah, sure can. The next slide, please.
So okay. This is a set of hooks, or the Mōkaus, that I took on the trip with me. Some were completed, some were not, because I was working on some to show some of the archaeologists how I make them. And so they were arranged all different sizes and different materials. The smaller ones that are kind of silvery are made from pa shell, or mother of pearl. Some were made out of pua'a bone, and some were made out of pipi, beef bone. And then of course the pahiaku on the top left are made with mother of pearl.
So when I'm looking at this, in my mind, immediately I'm thinking, okay, what if this represented students? You know, people that come to you and say, Umi, do they ever call you uncle? Or they just call you Umi?
They call me uncle too often. Yeah. I think it's because they forget my name. So they call me uncle because they forget.
So they go, Uncle Umi, Umi Kai, I like to learn hook. What is your first response back?
My first response is why.
Why?
If they give me a solid answer, then I'll wait for the second time they ask. If they give me another good answer, then the third time they can start making one. Giving me the first request doesn't if it's not a sincere request and a good reason, then I kind of put it off to the side, and I don't teach them right away. I want them to justify why they want to make it. And they say, oh, I want to wear one just like you. And I said, you know, in Kahiko, they didn't wear hooks. It's too valuable. Today, we might wear it for the honoring the past, but don't make one just to wear it. Yeah, I want you to make one first to use. After that, you can make one to wear. I want you to learn the function.
Have you ever come across a student that, as a student was learning, you got to see yourself? The student had a way of mirroring your thoughts or your actions, and you got to you got to see yourself outside of yourself.
Oh yes, several times, and even with my mo'opuna, sometimes they remind me of me. Okay, even though I forget one name, they still remind me of me. She's the one that learns quickly. Students who sit down and you know, observation is one of the key learning tools by all ancient cultures. If we didn't observe, we couldn't have tamed the oceans. If we didn't observe, we couldn't have observed the skies and their guidance. We couldn't tame the kuahivis and get our la'au lapa'au if we didn't observe what was going on. So those that come to me and they watch, the first lesson is me doing the object. And I want to see who's watching and what they're watching, not just watching and seeing me make it. They have to see the placement of my hand. You have to see the placement of the tool and how I'm aggressively or non-aggressively reaching each part of that implement. That's the kind of person that I want to have as a student.
Yeah. You know, sometimes it's the person in the back row that's just watching so intently.
Yeah.
And they need to be pulled for, you know, they're so designed to disappear, but you already know that they're just looking. It's sometimes the child that's sometimes marginalized, but they have the eye. They're looking for detail.
Yeah.
And they make our heart beat a little different. Yeah. One more. This is Noea. One more, and then we're gonna. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have questions, please don't just put it in the chat. Okay. I thought this was interesting. Go for it, Umi.
This is a Hawaiian pump drill. It has the middle stick and a cross stick and a center flywheel. If you don't have a flywheel on there, it cannot work. That flywheel creates that centrifugal force that allows it to spin and unspin. And it was either made out of wood or out of stone or out of coral. When I made them for Dr. Senoto at Bishop Museum, he insisted that they be coral because that's what he found in his digs. The normal tip would have been the inside of a cone shell, because there's a spiral there, or a thick shell shaped with 4 corners on it. The one you see in the photo, I'm using a modern bit, which is a ordinary 6-penny nail that I pound on the cement and flatten out the tip some, and then sharpen it with a file and use that to create the puka in my niho mano, before I place them into the leo manos or the other implements that need shark's teeth. Not all shark teeth implements are weapons. You know, niho okis are not weapons per se, but having said that, anything can be a weapon. A stick, a stone, your hands. Basically, a niho oki is a utility knife versus designed to be a specific weapon.
Noel, can you please pull up the lei palawa? Oh yeah. What do we need to know about this?
Okay, lei niho palawa. For one, a lot of people think those strands on both sides go completely through the niho, when it does not. There are 2 separate coils, one on each side. I have to remind makers today, this is a modern one made out of a moose horn, moose horn antler. Okay, and I have to remind them that there's no tie next to the niho. There's the only tie is up at the top before the cordage to put around your neck. The 8 strands braided coils were of human hair and very, very meticulously braided and wrapped into this beautiful coils. Mine is this one. Mine is not beautiful as the ones in the museum. I've gotten as close as I can. This is nylon. It's not human hair. Human hair is very, very difficult to braid. I've tried it a couple of times and had to give up. It keeps coming apart. So I feel that they had to use some kind of kipau on their hand to let the hair settle and stay in place. If you look at the ones at the museum or any old one, it looks kind of waxy or matted or something. So if anybody knows how to do that, I can partner with you.
Okay. So again, if there are any questions, please don't be shy. But I wanna get a little poignant here, because we're at the last component of this journey, journey into our higher calling, or a deeper calling, a calling that doesn't just affect us, but affect our families and our communities. And that's the thing about Indigenous leadership. It's never just self-serving. There's always a community that we make emus for, that we make these makaus for, that, you know, we make the palawa for. It's about, and not necessarily just the physical communities, but helps us to understand that when we say community, we mean the ones that passed away and the ones that are yet to be born. Let's say we're going to be 80 years old, and
we all
our
are.
time will come. yeah. And our time will become when we have to prepare to the other journey. We're going to launch into the spirit journey. And maybe some of your things are so valuable that you know, your mo'opuna, that you forget the name, go and say, this is Tutu's things, nobody's gonna touch it, and I'm gonna lock it up, because people, you know, families have a way of borrowing, but you know, the same scenario, because it's been like that for 2,000 years with our families. What are you going to leave in that room to be found by that mo'opuna that's going to break in? What do you want to leave behind so that mo'opuna you'll be it? What are you going to leave behind for that person when he breaks in or she breaks in? What they're going to find?
Yeah, that's interesting question. My daughter Novelle, who kindly stepped in and gave me Keohiki's name. I'm glad she was able to do that. She's getting most of the things that are in the house because she is the responsible one that knows who would appreciate what the most out of her three brothers. So she'll divide it all up. For the mo'opuna, what I would like them to receive, and they may not, is something similar to what I give out as a makana when we have the ka'imua ceremonies. So at the ka'imua ceremony, when the boy is now introduced into the halemua, I present that boy with a makana consisting of raw material. So it might be bone, might be ivory, might be both, might be wood, might be nihon, and I wrap it all up and tell them when they are ready, you come to me, and we will make what you think is appropriate with it. So for my mo'opuna, hopefully they would be able to recognize what needs to be made because they've come often enough to know how to make. But even if they don't know how, they can take the raw materials and create their own from what they see in the so-called collections that I have.
Yeah. So when I just told Kekui today, I was joking around because I'm now thinking the quality of my life has to extend. I have to look at myself. Not I'm going to live forever in the physical, but there's a time when I have to start preparing, and I'm beginning to think about it, and I'm thinking, of course, I have this one son says, Dad, you're not going to wait till you die before you start giving away your ahu. He's talking about the clothes, my virtual clothing. I said, buddy, no worry, fit them anyway. But I told Keiko here, we have beautiful kids, beautiful grandchildren. My wife is my best friend, and she's my best friend, and we were there to support each other when the world didn't know how to support us because we're starting journeys that the world never went on or couldn't remember being on. And some of the challenges we got came because we're beginning to question our own practices, like in hula. Why were we doing this? Some people was okay just doing it. We wanted to know why. And why should we do it? Should we give it up? If we're gonna be masters of it, we needed to own that responsibility. So I told my wife, I said, and I think about these kids, of ours, we're gonna leave them. Before I leave, I'm gonna buy them all a brand new vacuum so they can keep the house clean, and I'm gonna leave them with all my memories. and that's a humorous way of accepting the fact, and perhaps humorously entering into a conversation that may not always be comfortable. But the fact that we don't live for ourselves, the joy of living in a cycle is that how we live brings joy to the ancestors, but it also brings joy to the descendants yet to come. And so I want to say thank you, Umi, for involving your mo'opuna and showing those images of your mo'opuna, because most of our students that come to college, we have some non-traditional students, they come with babies already and families, but a lot of our young ones, they're young, and it's good to be young and not caring, but we need them to learn quick, and we need them to learn well. And and we need them to become, we need them to take the hoiuli. They got to take the hoiuli of their canoe, else they're going to be living in somebody else's hoiuli. And it's okay to share canoe, but you don't want to live your whole life and realizing that you've been paddling somebody else's canoe, your entire life. So I want to thank you. It was meaningful to see photos of your mo'opuna, and she's going to write a song. Remember when Grandpa went on Zoom and would forget my name?
Love you, Keoiki.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to see. Yeah, I'm going to look at all of you over here. So, again, if you have the email with Umi, and I don't want to push you into asking questions. You can put it in the chat. I don't want to pressure you, but please. If there's anything that he shared was quite reminiscent of your story or the story that you've inherited, someone's story, then sometimes it's a great thing to say, yeah, thank you. Thank you for reflecting a piece of me that I totally forgot was there. Or thank you for giving voice to a piece of my journey that I didn't have the voice. Because sometimes somebody might have the voice to describe our journey. But also, whether you have biological mo'opuna or you're going to inherit the kuleana of the children in your community, there's always going to be that one derelict person that just does all the naughty things that you used to do, and they're going to need you. They're not going to need their mother or their father. They might need you. The tourist, the tour guide person with cleaning his shark tooth, somewhere in Waikiki. You might be that random kupua that child may need. That child, he or she, or that mahu child may meet you only once. And we have an opportunity to resource that person's life, whether one tooth or two tooth or three. So I want to say mahalo to that haole tour guide because he had teeth for you. But mahalo to the tutus that put all of us into the same kinds of situations. I want to say mahalo to Umi, and your name is maybe that's a loaded name, that one. So maybe some people will call you uncle because they're scared called that name because it's a beautifully loaded name. But I want to, ladies and gentlemen, all of you
Talbot
here.
George is Hawaiian, by the way.
Oh, okay. But please, the next time you pass a mirror, look at yourself and stop and ask yourself the question, how are you? And maybe sit down and have a conversation with yourself. We're so busy talking to the world, we tend to forget to talk to ourselves. Ask those deep questions. Did I break in? Did I learn? Did I make breaking in really worth it? Because of me breaking through the boundaries, are my people better? Did I contribute to my family? That's what matters. So Umi, I want to thank you. I only knew your art, and I knew that you are one of those artisans. That's a really bad word, but we got to find the really right one. But the implements that you do, I knew that you're one of those that insisted on the cultural aspects. You couldn't just access the art. It came with a culture, and you're a stickler for that. And for that, we mahalo. Thank you all. Any of you have any questions over here? You rather ask them, or you want, look, chat. How much over here get? What they say over here? They say mahalo, or yes, Talbot George is a descendant of John Wise. Is that a metaphor? Are these real people? Are you guys speaking to me in code? No, it's John Wise. Okay, that's a real person. Okay. How totally flashes my daily life. Okay, so this Makani Greg. Hi, Makani Greg. She goes, mahalo nui, love the how totally flashes my daily life, and those makana that are raw. That's how I would love to do it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, somebody says, thank you for us guys hosting. Hi, Moani. Mahalo, Umi, for reminding us that to learn is to teach. You're very inspiring. That in itself is very powerful. Yeah. So inspiring. Mahalo for sharing your mo'olelo. Eternally grateful. And then Noel writes, you guys can see in this chat over here, please visit kaicompany.com if you have any further questions of Umi Kai. We all have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. We all have an opportunity to affect someone's life positively. And even if we're the nightmare in the life, you know, because that nightmare is going to get them to trigger into their better selves, then let us be aware of that. Let us always remember that people have spirits. And when those little mo'opunas are running around, just remember they're not just mo'opunas, they're actually kupuna in mini size. And love them, hug them. And especially the naughty ones, they just need more hug and a different kind of a hug. Umi, love you. Mahalo anui. Thank you for sharing your story. It's recorded, so you can give it to, you can use it. But I hope there's an opportunity for you to capture this piece of the story. And so if you have an opportunity to hold Umi's works, do remember those works by themselves are not manifold. It's that story that comes, that story that guides, and that story that continues to grow. Umi, I hope you have a good sleep tonight. You've done a great thing. You didn't tell me no. I would go, oh my God, Umi told me no. But thank you for sharing. I really appreciate
Mahalo
it.
to you.
Okay,
Mahalo
I want to say
your
thank you to
crew.
Noel. Yeah, Noel, and then Noel, and Gail Makuakane in London was on her phone, but she had to go to Pune. And then you know how Pune is, yeah? The Wi-Fi. So, sometimes she's stuck in Pune. So, but she says to give you the aloha, our love to Leina Ala and to your children, and to the Mo'opunas. Hui ho no kako a Pauloa. See you guys next week. Who's on next week? Noel, who's on next week?
Kainoa is on next week.
Who?
Kainoa. Kainoa.
Oh, Kainoa and Kainoa. Kainoa and Bernates is one of our Kanaka from Honoka'a, from that side of the island. Came to the University of Hawaii at Hilo, got his degree. We thought he was going to be a singer because he just has this really lovely falsetto that just makes you fall in love when you hear that. He went to New York, went into pastry chef school, and we're like, whoa, okay, I guess, but interesting. His passion is Hawaiian language, and he grows Hawaiian language through the songs that he sings, but also through cooking. He has a program of cooking and making recipes, like a cook show, but in the Hawaiian language. So please do drop in. You don't have to have a Hawaiian language background, but I think you have an opportunity to celebrate how far we've come when we nearly lost it. But people decided, no, it will not be lost in our time. And so this is a product of somebody's decision, 100 years ago, to keep this language alive. So come, and he'll be televised, he'll be zooming in from New York. So that's interesting. I gotta go. I can talk Hawaiian, but after a while, I'd rather talk Pidgin. This is my first language. I gotta go polish up. I'm getting nervous with that one. See you guys next week. Ahui ho no kako. Good night.
Aloha.
Oh yeah.